The clapperboard.
Bum, bum, bum. If you're tuning in, welcome to the show. Today's show is so exciting.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is Improve Your Carbon Footprint, where we talk about climate change, what's happening, what's the threat, and what we can do about it. And as Gary says today, very exciting, we're talking about climate change, what I can do about it. So this is relevant to everybody's listening in and everybody throughout the country and throughout the world. This is about what I can do about climate change. So our panel, myself, Charles Appleby, I'm the founder of No CO2, that's n0co2.org. We plant trees, plant enough trees, and you go carbon neutral. Mm-hmm. We have Jenny Edwards, CBE.
Yeah.
Jenny been a CEO with mental health, and in addition to that, more recently moved over to take on climate change as well. Now, Jenny's been to The Hague in the Netherlands to talk to Shell at their shareholder meeting. So I'm really excited to hear what she's going to say about what happened there. And Gary, who's chairing the discussion today. So Gary, over to you, Gary.
Well, as a human being, this interests me. I want a planet that we can live in future generations as a dad of four.
Of course.
And we've just recently met, and I'm so excited about your story. But can you tell, for those who don't know you, can you tell us who you are, the achievements you've made, what you've done? You're very impressive. I've told you that. You're very impressive.
I've got two flatterers either side of me. So, hi everybody. It's very exciting to be here. This is my first Facebook Live, and if it doesn't turn out to be too frightening, I might even do it again.
Well, we'll hold you to that.
So I've reached an age where it sounds like I've done lots, but that's because I've had a lot of years to do them in. I've worked in mental health. I'm currently doing some work on health and mindfulness and well-being and nature, which all links together. But like everybody, I'm a human being. I'm a mother. I'm a friend. I happen to live in Enfield, not far from where we're recording this, and my eyes are open and I see and hear what's happening in our world. And I realise that at this stage in my life, there was probably nothing more important for me to do than to do what I can in my personal capacity around the climate crisis that we're in the middle of. My background has been in campaigning. I've done a lot of campaigning for free entry to museums and galleries, which was a good and successful one.
Were you instrumental in that?
I was. I set up the campaign, which started with just
Mr. Blair got all the credit.
Well, it's fine. If you campaign successfully, the politicians always need the credit, because that's the way that you encourage them to go on and do more. So I've done that in homelessness and other areas of getting mental health and prevention and well-being and mental health thought about, not just treatment. But I'm always happy for politicians or everybody to take the credit, because it means that they can build on top of that.
And what do you think is going to be the game changer for politicians to really take notice of the environmental emergency that we have?
It's up to all of us, people like the three of us here and our families and our neighbours, to show that there is the political space for real, determined action that is not going to be simple. If it was simple and easy, we'd have done it before. And it's going to take some courage from all of us, and we're going to take all of us out of our comfort zone. And if we can show that it's possible to do, and we're prepared to do it, then it opens up the space where real change can happen. And we've not got very long to do that in.
You're pretty unreasonable. Getting on a plane. For those that don't know what remarkable thing you did, would you mind telling us that? You were completely unreasonable.
I was.
And I love it. I love it.
Well, when Charles and I met at a conference in the spring, I was there to have a think about what could I do. And one of my histories really has been talking to people in power and being sort of respectful of them.
Yeah.
But bringing the evidence to them in a way that's reasonable, and we can have a conversation. And I kept getting this feeling that got stronger and stronger. I had to do something as a shareholder. Yeah, I've never been an active shareholder. I inherited some from my auntie, and wasn't very active. So I ended up with some Shell ones, which I felt guilty about. But I knew I had to do something about it. So I didn't get on a plane. I got on a train. I got on the Eurostar and ended up in The Hague. And with the help of an organisation called Share Action, so sort of thanks to them. First of all, I met some of the environmental movement in Amsterdam. We had a really good discussion. I did my homework first. I read a lot of papers from the Union of Concerned Scientists and others about Shell, as well as Shell's own documents. And I planned what to raise there. So at the AGM, I stood up, I made sure I was right by the microphone so I could stand up as the sort of second or third person to speak. And I spoke with evidence and from my heart, but with respect to them as well. And for about 7 minutes, so they gave me quite a good crack at it. And the chair said he agreed with virtually everything I said, which was good. And he came up and chatted with me after, and I met one of their directors who I happen to have known many years back. We've met since. So I'm still in dialogue with them. And I've said to them, I'm going back next year and I'm looking for them to commit to transformational change. That what they've been doing over the decades has been one of the causes of the climate crisis that we're in, them and other companies. They have pledged to support the Paris Accords, but we know that's nowhere near enough. So I'm looking for a real transformation next year. And I'm going to be writing to them, suggesting some of the key elements in that.
I'm sure Charles has got lots of questions to ask.
Frightening. Yeah, Gary, the only thing is we are talking about what people can do about climate change. So let's save for later what corporates can do. Let's get back to what people can do. But what I'd just like to say at this point is that what I see happening is that the UK government and now 76 other countries have made some sort of commitment to going net zero CO2 by 2050. But what's happening locally now is that the discussion is turning to 2030 and what can be done. And so there's a real interest and willingness to reduce CO2 emissions by 50% by 2030. Now, my research shows that that's absolutely possible, and it's near enough, it's specific enough as a target, and so everybody can be part of that. It's now something we can get on with, and I think this will make a difference to the politicians, because if they see something specific that is achievable, which it is, it's going to make a difference to their attitude. So, Gary, back over to you.
I still want to know more about how you felt. When did you think, well, I'm going to jump on a plane? But
on a train.
On a train. When did you think that?
I really fought against it because I thought, oh God, that's really boring. Can't I do something, kind of just go and, well, which I did, plant some plants in the wetlands in Brimfield Park, which is lovely. But no, this is my skill, so I thought I'd go and do that. And actually, I thought about people's emotions, and I think it's not just about our heads. We have to use all of ourselves as human beings, brains, bodies, hearts, hands, to be part of the solution. And actually there was a really interesting Indigenous elder at the conference that Charles and I were at, who said, when you're with people in power, throw the spear of truth at their hearts. So, yeah, which is a very sort of Inuit sort of thing to say. But I did have that in mind, as I thought this is my job to be courageous, even though my legs were slightly like that. That I had to think of that warrior internally to have the courage to stand up and challenge.
You have a great many passions, but the passion. Can we start at the beginning when climate change? You started to get passionate about this and thought, I really need to do something about that. Where always starting at the beginning makes sense. What was it that triggered you? Because anybody watching this, I'm hoping you'll feel inspired by this story and that you might, by you sharing, you are going to watch us and think, do you know what? I'm going to get on the train.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go and do something like that. So, can we start from the beginning? What was it that really inspired you about climate change?
Well, I suppose it started some years back when I went to something called Be the Change, which showed us a lot of the damage that was happening to the earth and the loss of species. You know, we've lost 83% of our animal species. This is incredible, and a lot of it has been over my lifetime, and actually opening yourself up to feel that.
I think when we say a statement that big, we need to repeat it. For
83%. This is
for effect, that really is huge.
and we hear about the big animals, like the polar bear and the tiger and the panda, and you know that we've all seen the publicity about it. So, oh, that's really terrible. But when we think it's the little insects as well.
Charles, do you know how much of that is because of deforestation at all? Do you know the numbers?
I think that there's multiple causes the way I see it, Gary. I mean, part of it is deforestation, which is largely caused by poverty. A lot of it is caused by ignorance, and a lot of it is just caused by things being in the wrong place. I mean, at the moment we've got HS2 railway line, which is ploughing through a load of historic original forest. So I'm sure the guys have made a bit of an effort to do stuff, but it's just becoming so important that we cannot keep taking casualties of habitats and wetlands and all these sorts of things. We have to do so much more. And by the way, where people are doing this, I mean, in London there's a lot of brownfield sites which people can use, but I think we're moving to a situation where if people do take greenfield sites for anything, then they've got to pay the consequential environmental price, which is that if you take an acre of greenfield, then you've got to give multiple acres back to nature as nature reserve, because otherwise it's just always the argument becomes you've got some fantastic project which is going to create jobs and all sorts of stuff, and there's a bit of environment which is sitting in the way irritatingly, which very quickly becomes a casualty, and we just can't do this any longer. So what is it, the statistic in a recent report, 75% of the Earth's land has been damaged or impacted by human existence, and that's caused the species loss that Jenny's talking about.
I think we also, for the people watching, we've got to remember there are things that we can do as well. And one of the great things about the Brits is that, you know, a lot of people love their gardens, and we love our birds and our wildlife. And actually, I think a third of Britain's birds are fed in our domestic gardens.
Is that right?
And in our gardens, I'm wearing insects in my ears. I've got bees. You know, casual. If you think of it as just convenience, we'll spray things with insecticide and we'll kill off everything, then we're not helping. But if actually we create in our gardens little oases for different species, and we don't think of all that stuff we didn't plant as weeds, but we think, well, what is that? Actually, some of them are quite beautiful, and in the right place they can be beautiful. We can have diversity in our own gardens, and we can make sure that the chemicals that have been so dangerous for our pollinators, there's none of that in our area.
Well, do you mind, Charles, because you're an expert in many different things, but for anybody watching this, why is the world getting warmer, and what has that got to do with planting more trees? Your mantra is to.
Okay, well,
just to repeat so people understand. Really,
let's put it this way: for 40 years now, scientists have been absolutely aware of this. They've been working flat out on climate change, so the knowledge and science of this is well known. I mean, don't get me wrong, Gary, I am not a climate scientist, but for me, I don't see any problem with with what scientists are saying and the provenance of that. You know, for me, this is the truth. They're saying that there is a problem. And it actually goes back to a time in many of our lifetimes. So basically, things started to get out of hand only in 1986, and it was in 1986 that we started to be emitting more CO2 than the world could actually absorb, and it's just got worse and worse and worse since then. So 30 years ago, there were commitments being made by the UN and others to say CO2 needs to be reduced. That hasn't been done. CO2 is increasing every year. You can look at the data. You need to look at the data for May each year. That's when it's at a maximum. You look at the data taken from Mauna Loa in Hawaii, the amount of CO2 emissions in the air, which is the maximum for the year.
Why
in
particularly
May,
Hawaii?
because Hawaii's in the middle of nowhere. I mean, if you took the measurement in central London or Shanghai, you'd get a false reading. But in Hawaii, the air's blown around everywhere, and every year consistently, it is going up and up and up. And the first thing we have to do, we in terms of people out there who look at data and say, well, what's been achieved? The first achievement data point has to be to get a year and then a second year when CO2 emissions are flat instead of going up. They go up every year.
Percentage-wise?
It's a little bit, but a little bit every year. So it's
Well, the sea level rises a little bit, but
a
there's going to be a
tiny bit.
problem.
More quickly than they thought as well.
Gareth, sea level rise is tiny but growing. This rise is it's about now 410 parts per million, and it's rising at about 2 to 4 parts per million per year. So it's about 0.5 to 1% a year, and that ramps up. We're now at 50% more CO2 in the air than at the historic start of this, which is taken as the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in the UK, when we started off on this trail of digging up coal and burning coal.
And nature's been really helpful to us when, up till now, like the sea has absorbed an enormous amount of the CO2 and actually taken quite a lot of the hit. So that's why the coral reefs are in a lot of trouble and have been bleached in some areas and have absorbed a lot of the heat as well. But that's now sort of reached its capacity. And trees are these amazing machines that we'd never think of inventing ourselves, that actually breathe in what we breathe out, and they breathe out what we need to breathe in. So if only we can get the balance right with them, they're on our side. But actually, we're just treating them as something you can knock down, burn, grow your stuff to feed your beef cattle for beef burgers. That's just stuff, and it's not.
Do you mind if I say that you're quite a spiritual individual?
No, I am.
You are a spiritual individual. We all are. And what is difficult for me to understand is that people don't care, or they don't understand. And where Charles and I meet lots of people on a daily basis, and we're very passionate about this subject. How do we get people, the majority of people that live on this planet, to really understand the emergency that we're in?
I think we have to understand emotion. This is where my mental health background and mindfulness comes in. That people, either their lives are very busy with stuff, because we're all under so much pressure of paying the bills and worrying about what grades our kids are going to get at school, or are we saving enough for our retirement, or what about our next car, all that stuff, which isn't really important, as people know when they slow down and stop and think about it. Or we've heard about it, it's very hard to miss it, but it's frightening to think about. And fear, our first absolutely fundamental reptilian brain, tells us if we're frightened to hunker down and freeze, and that's our first thing. Our next thing is to get angry. So absolutely naturally we would, if we are worried about climate change, first of all think, no, I don't want to know about it. And then our next thing would be, people are making all this fuss, they're getting in my way, I'm so cross. So actually we have to get beyond all of that. We have to get our higher brain involved with our hearts, and that's really tough because it does involve.
I think that's the answer. I think win people's hearts.
But you have to be okay in yourself to take on board the reality of this huge threat that we're facing. And our kids, you've got 4 kids, you don't want to think before they reach the end of their natural life there's actually a 20% chance that the planet's going to be uninhabitable.
Incredible.
That's what a report that came out in May said from the National Academy of Sciences.
And even unborn children are being affected by this in the womb.
Of course. So it does mean that we have to be look after ourselves first and our own emotions, and then we can face up to what the reality is, and then we can think about what is it that I can do.
Such powerful words. This is really quite something. So that leads me very nicely into the next thing. If we are on board and we're emotionally accepting of what's happening. What are the things that we can do? The top 5 things that we can
Well,
do right now.
If anybody's resonating with what Jenny's just said, and I'm sure they are, because I certainly am. If people are resonating, then actually something you can do just within 5 minutes, and that is to plant trees. Planting trees is unique in that you can actually remove all of your CO2 footprint by planting trees. And so to remove the average UK CO2 emissions, you need to plant 1,750 trees.
Do you want to say that again, Charles?
1,750 trees, which through No CO2, nzeroco2.org, you can do for £187. So this is a one-time payment, because those trees will remove your CO2 for every year they grow.
Do you know about the aspect of the employment, of how this
Yes,
works?
that's
Charles,
brilliant.
would you explain that? Because
So
it's an ecosystem in itself.
If anybody's really interesting, we did an amazing Facebook Live just 2 weeks ago on the 11th of October. You can find it on the No CO2 Facebook page, and it's with Steve Fitch, who is the CEO of our tree planting organisation, Eden Reforestation. Now, I knew a bit about tree planting, but wow, having heard what Steve had to say, Gary knows it as well now. He told us amazing things.
And a couple of thousand other people know it too.
So basically, he told us how they have to negotiate with the local indigenous community, who previously had been cutting down trees because they were poor and didn't know what to do. And he told us about the amazing experience of people being paid $120 a month to carry on doing digging and planting things and whatever that they were doing anyway, but just to spend a few days doing it for Steve and his team, they got paid for the first time ever in their life. Can you imagine getting paid money for the first time ever? And so what they do, people spend part-time working planting the trees for your donations and for Steve. And the other part of the time they spend working on their own allotment, their own small holding. And with the money, they can start to send their children to school and build up a livelihood for their children in the future. So it's quite incredible. It's a real circular economy of us here in the West donating. We get the trees planted. They remove our CO2. They create paid work for people who have previously been in extreme poverty. And the trees, the idea is that they're planted for perpetuity. So they create a habitat for animals, wildlife, etc., etc.
I think it's a fantastic project.
It's an amazing thing.
And trees are something I think that we often walk past and don't appreciate. And living in London, so many of our roads have got trees along them, and they're sort of just there. And since I've become more aware of what's happening environmentally, I take time to really look at them. And their bark is often really beautiful just in patterns itself. And just down the road across the border in Haringey, there's a little piece of ancient woodland it's the 1 hectare left of the old Tottenham Forest, called Bluebell Wood.
St Anne's Hospital?
No, it's actually in Bounds Green. It's just behind Sunshine Garden Centre up the hill. So there's a Facebook page
An
there.
inside tip there, I like that.
And it has bluebells in the spring. But it's got a lot of old oaks, and it's a rare tree called the wild service tree, which you only find in ancient woodland. So one of the things I did when I came back from Findhorn was go and clear the plastic and rubbish from there and some builder's rubble. And I go there, and there's a sort of, one of the trees has got a sort of a bump on it, which must have been from an old injury. I sit there and I do short mindfulness and I listen to the birds. There are 18 different species of birds there I found on an app. And you can really feel that those trees have been there for so many of our lifetimes. And all that time they've been delivering oxygen to us. And actually there's many other things. There's so many experiments that people are doing now about the natural world. You can put in 2 hotel rooms a normal atmosphere or an atmosphere taken from a forest, and people spend the afternoon there, and the people who come out of the one with the forest atmosphere feel better. Nobody can quite explain it, but that's been done scientifically. And of course, as we also know, this amazing thing is going on with billions of microorganisms below the roots of a forest as well, which is feeding the soil, nurturing the soil, and actually capturing carbon too. So they're planting new forests
from below the ground.
and actually trees do feed each other. So absolutely fascinating. So if people haven't reconnected to trees yet, and I'm still learning some of my trees, then that's one of the first things they can do to really feel how valuable they are to us.
So just while we're talking about trees are under huge pressure in the UK from development. They're just in the way as regards a lot of buildings and roads and things. So please, if you are living near some trees and you want to keep those trees and they're under pressure, then do get involved to do something about it, because they've been growing there probably for 20, 50, 100 or more years, and once they're gone, they're gone. So we do not want to lose those trees. So let's lose the trees we've got, and let's plant some more trees so they can do even more good.
And water your street trees in the summer.
Why not?
Great.
Why
Looks
not?
after them.
Yeah, please do. I did.
Why not? I love that. So practical things that we can do right now. Have you got any more tips?
Well, I think look after yourself first, because you need that strength for the times that we've got ahead, and to be strong and to take your own personal qualities out, and look after your family and the people you love, because actually our personal connections are our strength as human beings. That's how we've evolved. But I think what people say, what we do individually in our homes doesn't make a difference, but I think we need to be authentic. So the more we get rid of plastic and we recycle, we don't use chemicals.
A big supermarket this week made an announcement that wasn't going to use any more plastic to wrap its fruit.
Absolutely.
I like that. Well, are we allowed to?
Whatever.
Sainsbury's have announced that.
I went to the Marks and Spencer's AGM as well and talked to them about
God
strengthening
for
their
you!
Plan A.
Oh, I love it.
And waved around some plastic wrapped rosemary and said, "This is what's all wrong." So
I think it's very powerful. It certainly
It
would
is.
make, as a consumer, make my decision based on how
There's
environment
consumer
their
power.
credentials.
I've been engaged in a lot of discussion with my online shopping people as well. I won't say who they are, but about the nature of what they sell and the plastic in their tea bags. I think we can all send a little email or put a comment saying, "This matters to me," because it keeps opening up space for change to happen. So it might not be that what we buy makes a difference, but what we say. And when, for example, I'm eating much less meat. I've been a carnivore all my life, and I still like a steak, but I probably only had it twice this year. I'm teaching myself to cook far more plant-rich diet, and when I shop and I'm buying unwrapped vegetables and things, I have a conversation with people around me about it. So it might be somebody at the till, if they've still got a till, or it might be people as I'm shopping and say, "Oh, we could do with more of this, couldn't we?"
Tell
So
me
it's
about
spreading the message.
People listen to that,
Yeah.
and you're extraordinary. Unless you're extraordinary, you worry and you're anxious about rejection. You don't give a damn about rejection.
I'm old enough.
How
so
is
it
this?
doesn't matter.
So with baby steps. So you're going to speak to someone at the checkout about possibly some.
Yeah,
But they mustn't. You mustn't worry. I think I'd love to
what's
talk
the
about
worst that's
rejection.
going to
What's
happen?
the worst going to happen?
What's the worst going to happen? Somebody's going to say, "Oh, I don't want that muck." Because I'll go and I'll deliberately, if I see Morrison's or Sainsbury's or M&S have got a new vegan dish, I'll buy it because I think A, I want to try it. B, I'll talk about it. I'll say, "Oh, it's interesting that they're doing this. I tried something else last week and I was surprised it was quite good." And the person behind the till will generally say, "Oh, I haven't tried that, but my daughter's keen on veganism." I say, "Oh, well, it's worth giving it a try,
Can I bring Charles in on that? I've had the pleasure of knowing Charles for a few months now. And you talk about tree planting and all the passionate things you care about to just anybody that will listen. What's your point of view on rejection and people maybe dismissive of the global emergency that we have right now? How does that make you feel? What goes through your mind? Do you ignore it? Because you're really tenacious. You don't take no for an answer.
Well, there's people who've got further to go on their journey to understand it, and I think what's like any situation, what's really, really important is to get the people who are already involved, get them to do more, and to get them to reach out to their contacts, because this is a really crucial thing, that a lot of people already reduced their CO2 and done stuff. Now, because of the emergency, everyone needs to do more, right? But if people reach out to their friends and contacts, this has a big multiplier effect. But there's people there. I mean, there are very public climate deniers, and really, I'm certainly not going to be in a position to persuade them, and I wouldn't be able to, and probably wouldn't try. But the people we do need to talk to are the people who've got families, they're busy, they're concerned, they're aware of climate change. Once they start to know a bit about it, they'll be very concerned that the future of their children is going to be wrecked, because 99.9% of people want to look after their children. They want a better future.
And you
for their
say that
children.
with conviction, because
Absolutely.
there will be skeptics out there, and they say the statement you just made is so powerful. With lots of powerful things. Your children's future will be wrecked. Can we clarify that? Because that should put the fear of God into everybody watching.
Yeah.
Okay.
How can you put that? I'm going to challenge you on that.
Gary, you don't need me to give you all the details, because it's all in the news. You can look at it on the news, you can look at it online from authoritative sources, you can look at it yourself. David Attenborough, BBC News, everywhere saying a similar thing. So what climate change means is it means the world warming up. And what that means, it means that the sources of ice, the glaciers, the Arctic, the Antarctic will warm up. And there's a lot of ice there. And there's enough easily for 20 to 30 feet of sea level rise. Now, we're having a tiny amount of sea level rise each year. It's gone up a little bit. But once this thing gets going, the problem is it becomes unstoppable. And so 20 to 30 feet, imagine it. It means that your holiday beach, your holiday hotel goes. A lot of the world's poorest people live by the rivers, by the sea. Their places will be taken over, or they'll lose their livelihood. Then
it's already being affected.
Yeah,
I mean, we're lucky in the UK, and in a sense, we haven't had a major problems from it. Though we have had flooding and we have had fires, but other parts of the world, you look what's happened in Malawi or the Bahamas this year, or the wildfires that are going in California at the moment. People's lives are being lost to the catastrophic climate change we already have.
So let's just talk about the Bahamas, because this is really important. What's happening here is that because the world is warming up, the power of hurricanes and tornadoes is getting bigger. So that now we're at 1.1 degrees roughly of global warming. As it warms up, we will get more and more powerful. I mean, the whole Bahamas island was completely destroyed, and there was one on the African coast this year, wasn't there? Mozambique was one of the most severe hurricanes ever, and so people's lives are being ruined by these things. So, but fundamentally, you've got the heat and drought. And weirdly, you've got heat, drought and floods. So you've got this nightmare combination. You don't know which you're going to get. And the end result, inevitably, is that crops get destroyed. Once crops are destroyed, then we have food shortages. We have refugees on a scale that we've seen nothing yet is the risk. And basically that causes instability, not just in the countries which are affected, but in the West as well.
We are in this amazing place. So I don't think we realise, some people say if we knew the nature of the universe and the earth in it, it'd be like a dragon suddenly appeared, because it's just so extraordinary that we're in that very sweet spot where life is. And as far as we know, this is the only planet in the entire universe that have the condition. It's the Goldilocks thing, isn't it?
That's very cute. So if you've never heard of the Goldilocks, do you want to explain?
Well, it's the Goldilocks story. You don't want the porridge that's too hot, and you don't want the porridge that's too cold.
Just right.
We are the Goldilocks climate, and it took billions of years for us to reach this, and it's very finely balanced. I don't think people realise what so many astronauts have said when they've looked back at the Earth from on far. They've realised how delicate and fragile the space that we live is, and once you tip it out of equilibrium, then we don't know any way that it could come back. So
I
it's
had-
in our hands as human beings either to tip it out or to be what I think we've evolved to be, which is the stewards of our environment. And being a gardener for me is the sort of skill that we need, where we do some tough things, we cut things back, we dig things up, but actually we are connected to living things around us when we do that, and that's the approach that we should have to the natural world on which we and everything depend.
But let's not leave people with the thought that it's all bad and nothing can be done about it, because the whole purpose of the talk today is to say to people, yes, we can do something about it. That's what we're talking about. That's what people can do. So people can make a difference.
I don't know if anybody's ever read that book called The Tipping Point.
I love it.
I think it's great, and it really helps us understand that we have to move along bit by bit if we're going to achieve major change. That first of all, you've got a few lonely voices, then you've got the people who research deeply, then you have the people like the two gentlemen here who communicate that and get it out there to people, and then you get your innovators and your early majority. And what we were talking about was some of the people in the later majority who'll come along, where I think we're just winning that early majority round to understand we all have to change our lives and find the things that we can do.
So there are people protesting in central London. I love
I
your
was
view on
there.
that. How are they making a difference? How are you making a difference? Because it's mixed reviews, really.
Yes, if we could change things by continuing quite comfortably and quietly and passively, then we would have done that over the last 30 years. As Charles has said, that's been tried. People have written the
Einstein
books.
said, if you
We've
do
had
the
the
same
Blue
thing,
Planet. If you you do the same thing, then you're very foolish. So I really pay tribute to the people from Greta Thunberg, to the Extinction Rebellion, who have many professional groups, from scientists to lawyers to doctors, as part of that. Who are putting it into the headlines. And it will be inconvenient, it will be difficult, and sometimes there will be disagreements. But I was down there handing out trees to MPs, and that was lovely, because I can have a great conversation with them.
That's so
Yes.
innovative.
Well, somebody
Brilliant.
else organised it all, but
Brilliant.
I spoke to people of all parties. I had pictures with them. I tweeted out that we had conversations, good conversations with people of every party, and it was to start with a gift is to start a conversation that can become, it can grow from there. And we have to do something. It's no point sitting back and thinking somebody elsewhere is going to do it. There's a very famous phrase, if not now, when? And if not us, who? There is nobody else out there. So I'm looking at that camera.
Absolutely.
And you.
Take heed.
I'm looking at you, and it's you as well as us who are sat this side of the camera. Nobody else is going to do it for us.
Wow. Okay, well, there's some things that people can do. So for me, a really important one is to talk to other people. So talk to people, engage other people, get them involved, because you're engaged yourself. So it's now a matter of multiplying the impact by getting other people involved. But what everybody needs to do, they need to think about reducing their CO2 emissions. Okay, you might have gone vegan already, but we now need to reduce our CO2 emissions even more. And so it's really, people can think about this, and there's lots and lots of things that people can do. So my friend Roland, he reduced his electricity bill by £174 a year by switching to green electricity. So people think that green, clean electricity can be more. It's not. I mean, for him, he saved a whole load of money. So that's an easy one. Think about what you're doing.
I was going to say, also, wear a vest. We're out of the habit of wearing vests in the winter, and we turn up the heating. Actually,
As a dad, I like that one.
Yeah,
I really like that.
When your kid says, let's turn the thermostat up, put a jumper on,
Well,
wear a vest.
if we're talking about gas central heating, which most people have, absolutely. I mean, turn the temperature down a bit. And the other trick is to put the heating on in the year, like in October, November time. Put the heating on later, turn it off earlier in February, March, April time. These sort of tricks you can save a lot, because it used to be you used to walk into people's houses and it'd be so hot and you'd say, oh, this is fantastic, I wish our house was as hot as this. Now it's cool to be cool, guys. We've really moved on from there. It's much better to walk in someone's house and it be cool, and people sit and you think, wow, these people are really climate conscious, because it's cool. It's cool to be cool.
Well, if you see somebody with a T-shirt on in the winter, say, you think it's summer? There used to be this old phrase that my parents used to say, like, were you born in a field? Shut the doors, keep your warm room warm. And it saves you money as well as actually helping the planet.
Right.
And actually, for our carbon footprint, travel is important. We were talking earlier about planes, but do you need to fly? Trains are really good. You can talk to people, you can look out the window, you can walk around, have a sleep.
Yeah.
And I've been to various countries in Europe this year. I've been to France and Germany, and then Netherlands for the Shell thing. My son's in Germany. I've taken the train each time, and it's been great. It's been part of the break.
Those micro things add up. I tell the children not to leave the water running when they're brushing their teeth. Wear an extra jumper. The micro things add up to one huge thing.
Travel and diet are the two big things where actually our impact as just human beings in our own country can make a big difference.
And where you spend your money.
Yeah, so you save money too. And you don't have to say, I will always be a vegan for every day, always, if you've spent your life doing something else. Some people will be, and all hail them. But, I've spent many years with a different diet. But just change the balance of your diet. It's good for your health as well. And learn to cook more vegetarian food.
This is very important. It's very simple. I mean, the numbers very, very broadly, roughly, are that if you instead of having a meat-based meal, you switch to a vegetarian food day, you save about 1 kilogram of CO2 per day. So, 1 day a week, starting off 1 day a week, making it a meat-free day, you're saving 50 kilograms per person per year, and then you build it up. And so if you want to switch to vegan, then you save very roughly, you save an extra kilogram per day. But it's all about making a start, getting it onto the radar. And going back to what we were saying earlier when Jenny was talking about the motivations, this thing about habits is so powerful. We talk about travel, and Gary automatically said fly. Travel, fly. It doesn't have to be that way, and we're all wrapped in these habits. If we carry on with the habits, then basically we just continue and we sink the planet. We have to think through. It's about people choosing what they want to do. I mean, if you're inspired to do something, then do it. If you're particularly motivated that you cannot give up something, then give up something else instead.
It can be inconvenient. I've got more time, so it's fine for me to take a train. But some people will fly London to Edinburgh, but the carbon cost of that is 10 times higher than taking the train. What we want also is government policy that actually makes it something that gives us a nudge financially as well. As we're saying, if you reduce your heat, then you save money. But at the moment, it costs more to take a train than a plane, which is ridiculous. We need the government to step in with that. We know that aircraft fuel is subsidised at the moment, doesn't have to pay the tax of other forms of transport. Well, let's stop that.
So if you had the magic wand, I'm going to ask you both this question. You have the magic wand and you could change any policy, what would you start with? Would you force everybody to have electric cars? That wouldn't be very popular with your friends at BP. what would be the kind of things you'd both do? I'm so interested to know. A wish list, if you like.
I believe in the sort of nudge theory, that if you just give people the right little incentives, then people do want to do the right thing. So I would say to government, look at all aspects of finances that affect the public and just push us to do the right things for the climate, incentivise that, make public transport good and cheap. We've got some of the most expensive public transport and unavailable in many areas in Europe. I'm fortunate because I'm in London, so I don't run a car. But if I was elsewhere in the country, that would mean I couldn't get
Very
around.
difficult.
So let's share the small private cars there. Let's have social Ubers, and let's make those buses available everywhere. And they're now running on biogas. They don't have to run on oil and petrol. They've just introduced a fleet in Bristol that's running on biogas
I
from
love that.
household waste.
I love that. Potatoes,
Yeah,
in particular.
turn our household waste back into run cheap buses.
Charles, what would be your wish list?
I totally agree with Jenny that the about people doing things. It's an opportunity really for leadership from the government. So I mean, people expect the government to do all sorts of things, but on this one, I really think that the government can do more to lead on what individuals can do. And some of these things don't necessarily cost much. They don't cost anything necessarily. But if there's one big policy initiative that I would really go for, it would be basically carbon pricing. So what's happening at the moment is that Jenny raised the example. Most people don't know this, but for reasons going back to the 1940s, airlines and therefore ourselves pay zero tax on the kerosene that they put in the planes. So there's zero tax right the way through the system, right the way through the world, and it's for historic reasons. Now, if you get in your car, you pay a massive amount of tax all the way down the line. You pay loads and loads of tax on your fuel. So that's an unfairness. It unbalances things, like for the reasons that Jenny said. But also, what we want people to do, we want people to really see the true cost of what they're doing. So a lot of fuel is polluting. You walk along main roads and you've got masses of pollution coming from petrol and diesel cars. Whereas now it's possible to have an electric car, but an electric car at the moment it's just struggling to be cost effective. So the carbon pricing, now when people hear about carbon pricing they think, oh no, what's going to happen now? The cost of fuel is going to go up. But if it's done sensibly, if it's done properly, then it gives people an opportunity to move to electric instead. Right? And there's a particular scheme out there. It's been promoted by Citizens Climate Lobby worldwide and in the UK, and it's called cap and dividend. So actually, the idea is that what you pay in carbon tax, you get back as a rebate. So the only people net who pay are people who use a lot of fuel. So,
and of course, for children in cities like London as well, that would save so many lives. We know that so many children are being affected by vehicle pollution.
That's right.
And so, if you just even want to think about the costs, the costs is in human pain and grief. But the cost to the NHS is high as well. It's just that's not factored in to all these other things. So once you start looking really at what's happening, also our consumerist lives, which is part of what's generating this huge, we've got to create all the time, are not making us happy. Our mental health isn't good, and people are anxious and always worried about the status of their clothes and cars and so on. Actually, we could lead more satisfying lives if we don't have to take it away completely, just dial it down and say, actually, we're going to give ourselves status because we've actually mended some of our clothes that got a hole in it. Do remember how to darn a sock.
Very good. Now, Charles has got a solution. So if you've got around £190, there's a way of neutralising your carbon footprint. Charles, will you tell us about that? Because
thanks, Gary.
It's powerful.
So first of all, let's be clear, really important is to reduce your CO2 emissions as much as you can, right? It's your choice, but when you've got to the point where you've reduced it, the next stage is to remove your CO2 emissions, and you can remove your CO2 footprint by planting trees. And what's amazing about this is that you can actually remove all of your CO2 footprint in one go with one donation through the system. So the organisation is n0co2.org. We plant trees, and as Gary says, if you plant enough trees, then you go carbon neutral. So in the UK, on average, people are creating 7 tonnes of CO2 per person per year. So to put it in perspective, the big food supermarket delivery lorries, fully laden, they've got about 30 tons on board. So that's the weight. That lorry is the weight of the CO2 emissions for a family of 4 in 1 year. So what we want people to do is not to focus on planting trees for one journey, but to focus on planting trees for your lifestyle, which is the 7 tons. So if you plant 1,750 trees, that's 1,750, then those trees on average will remove 7 tons of CO2 for every year those trees are growing, which is 20, 30, 40 years. And we can plant those trees through our tree planting partner in Madagascar, Indonesia and Nepal for £187 or £5 a month. So do please take a look at it.
I was just wondering about the trees when they're little. Presumably there's a few years when they're saplings and so on where they're less efficient at removing the oxygen. When do they really come on board?
It's
as
on average.
Sort of
Well,
powerhouses?
Things in the UK grow quite slowly, but trees in the tropics grow a lot faster than they do here. I mean, they grow 3 times faster than they do here, these guys are planting in the tropics. He said that what he said 2 weeks ago on when we had him on the Facebook Live here. What he said is that they went back in Nepal 4 years later, and some of the stuff was up to 20 to 30 feet in 1 year. So, yeah, I mean, in the first year it's not going to be absorbing so much, but overall, and it absorbs a lot. And secondly, what they're doing in places like Madagascar, they're planting a lot of mangroves, and mangroves are amazing because, as Jenny was talking about earlier, mangroves actually absorb a lot of CO2 directly into the ground, and they replicate very, very well. So you plant one, and in a few years you've got 10. So this is all a big multiplier on what's going on.
They're amazing.
Wow. Do you know, I really am curious to see what your next adventure is. It's top secret because part of your charm is you turn up. So
yes.
Well, can you tell us what you're going to do next?
Well, actually, this is a slightly bizarre thing, but some of my Facebook friends will get this. In Second Life, which is a virtual world, which is a great place to meet internationally, much reduced carbon footprint for meeting people.
There you go.
We're going to have a day of remembrance for lost species to focus on the species we've already lost, some of those 83% that I've talked about, and those that are most in danger.
And there is no Jurassic Park.
No.
This is a fantasy.
No.
Once they've gone,
we
don't have the technology right now to take it from their DNA or... They've gone, the dodo.
You've got, there's a beautiful moth that I've been looking at called the Jamaican sunset moth that went sometime in the last century, and it's so gorgeous. Its wings are iridescent and has rainbow colours, and it's gone forever. So I think that's going to be a bit of a symbol, and we'll have some poetry read out from people.
I'm very
around
interested
the world.
in joining you.
Oh yes.
Is it open to all?
It is. We'll see if we can broadcast it out of there, but actually if people have an avatar, they can turn up and be part of it.
And we'll put it in the notes, it'll be on the
show
notes.
notes. 30th of November.
If I can make it and broadcast it and help you with that,
That'd be
I would
lovely.
be really,
Fantastic.
really, that would be quite something. But the cynical, and I keep going back to these guys, they think, it's going to be people wearing daisy chains and flowery and Mother Earth.
Nothing wrong with flowers.
These are the corporate guys that we need to, and girls that we need to win over.
You need...
and thank goodness,
array.
the millennials.
Yes.
The millennials are fully on board.
And Gen Z.
Gen X, they're
Yes,
totally on board.
Well, the thing is, the kids, is they're quite right. They haven't got time for them to grow up and take over things and sort it out. They've got to prod and shout at us, because actually it's people who are adults now who've got the power in time to change it. Next year in Glasgow, we have the next one of the COPs, which are the international gatherings, and that is probably the last one where the international community can get together in time to stop the worst disasters happening. There are already disasters in some areas, as we know, but we can stop it really getting to be unimaginable. But that's next year. And the kids will be there. The adults have got to turn up with their answers. And that means, the facts and figures, the economics of it, but also hearts and minds, because we could have every report which the scientists have produced for us over and over again, and it hasn't moved people. We have to contact people we know and say, this matters to us, it matters to me, it matters to me for your future and your kids' future as well as mine.
It just reminds me of the child that breaks the parents' cigarettes. We really need that kind of attitude, and whether it comes from young people or baby boomers or people of influence, the world's politicians, that's who we need to win their hearts over, because they've got the power.
Yes, and we know that 30 people in the world own half of the world's worth. Now, if half of them changed what they did and really invested in the solutions we know are out there. There are books like Drawdown that has many of these solutions in. It's not that we ingenious humans don't have answers, but we don't have the political and economic will to make them happen. It doesn't take very many minds to change out of those influential people.
One of the health ministers that works for the NHS, she said that human beings are very good at finding problems that are imminent, but very bad at finding problems that are a long distance away. And again, to bring back that cigarette scenario, if you light a cigarette, well, it might be 20 years till this affects me. And I think that is a really big mindset. And Charles and both yourself are campaigning, and you're activists on trying to say that this actually is something that is round the corner.
I think that's where last autumn the IPCC report saying we had 12 years actually woke a lot of people up. And what we know, actually the chair of Shell said this,
credible source.
That was that actually we know that is very, very conservative, because they would only show what science has proved is happening, not the things that are indications.
Again, I would like you to repeat that.
The chair of Shell
said, admitted.
We knew. Well, he said we had a discussion about the later report that came out in May.
On record?
Well, yes, it wasn't secret. It was in the middle of the lunch after the AGM. He said, we know the IPCC can only say what is scientifically proven. It has to be acceptable to all the countries around that have to ratify that report. So we know reality is much tougher. And the report that came out the following May from the National Academy of Sciences said that the sea level was rising 2 to 3 times quicker than the IPCC report had said, and that we had this 20% chance, 1 in 5, of the Earth being uninhabitable by the end of the century. Well, 1 in 5, if you said, I go out your front door onto a road and I've got a 1 in 5 chance of being run over if I cross it, well, I'm probably not going to cross it. It's not a 50%, but it's a high chance. Well, that means that we can't sit and, it's 30 years, somebody else, another generation will sort out. It's now, and politically, internationally, it's probably next year. The indigenous peoples of the world have met together, funded by a trust, and they've said their motivation, wherever they draw their knowledge from, says that we've got 5 years.
Wow.
Well,
so let's get moving.
Talking of moving, like if you're watching this, and I don't know how we're being portrayed across, because it's difficult. It's going through a wire, it's going in the solar system, come back. I'm actually moved by your words, both of your words. You've made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Moving stuff, and we don't get paid for doing this show. The payment that we could have from you, if you're watching this and you're enjoying it, you want to share the message, is liking, sharing, commenting. Tell your friends. Social media is incredibly powerful. When the message goes out, we really want to tell as many people as you can. So if you are part of our movement and you want to make a difference, please just share this on Facebook. If you're listening to this on a podcast, give us a review. That would be amazing. Do you want to ask Charles any questions? You're such a fascinating guest. I've never heard Charles be so quiet. Let's bring Charles in because he's the coordinator. If you're watching this, it's Charles that stuck his neck out, and he was a bit unsure about the whole podcast, webinar, Facebook, and you were very brave in taking this decision. I think it's starting to work. On the last show, we had over 2,500 views. It's probably gone up since. We've got a really regular audience watching this. I thank you for that. How do you feel about that?
Well, thank you, Gary. This show wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for Gary. So, Gary, thank you so much. Yeah, excellent. Just to summarise, to keep it really simple for people. First of all, first thing to do with this climate emergency, if you want to do something about it, is to talk to other people, seek to get them engaged, get them involved. Secondly, thinking about reducing your own CO2 emissions in the way you want to do it, okay, in whatever way you feel able to. Thirdly, with the CO2 emissions you can't reduce, think about removing them, as we said, by planting trees. That's n0co2.org. You can plant a lot of trees there. Fourthly, do think about the environment, because it's actually not just a climate emergency, it's an environmental emergency as well. Jenny mentioned it earlier. Do you really need to use pesticides and herbicides, because they are killing stuff? It's very clear that the scientists are now saying those are killing stuff. And finally, to get involved, do join an organisation. On your own, you can do a bit, but you can easily get diverted when things don't go quite so smoothly. If you're part of an organisation, then they'll help pick you up and multiply your impact. So there's now lots and lots of organisations, locally, community organisations, national charities, international charities. Get involved, join one, help them, make a real difference through them.
I think for mental health as well, once we know how urgent this is and how serious it is, the way we can stay positive is through our action with others. That's why, we're all positive people, but we know this. If you're doing things on your own, it's very easy to sink back into feeling it's all hopeless, and we don't know what's going to happen. As I was saying earlier, the past is history, the future's a mystery, but what we have now is a gift. It's our time right now, and that's why they call it the present.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Beautifully said. So we're going to wrap things up. The hour has flown by, and I would love the possibility of not just 2,000 or 3,000, this being watched by 50,000, 100,000. It's the world's first podcast on global change and climate change. So it's quite a first, and we encourage other podcasts. If you want to know how to do this, then you can just you can contact us or Charles. A great Christmas present, a great gift to buy somebody that package, and we'll put the link in. So the last word, really, what can we do about this? What are your feelings? I'd love to pass you back to have the last word, both of you.
My very favourite quote is from Margaret Mead. She said, never think what people tell you, that a small group of people can't change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So if anyone's thinking there's only me and my friend who are interested in this, it could all start with that.
Well, I want to acknowledge you for your power and your discipline and your tenaciousness. If not everyone is born equal, and I think you're pretty exceptional. So I want to acknowledge you for that. You're exceptional. We've all got our power, but yours just happens to be great at turning up at meetings.
My friend.
Brilliant, Charles.
We've got Christmas coming up. A gift for people. Picking up on the present, a gift for people who've got enough stuff is to give them the gift of some trees, which creates paid work for people in extreme poverty, which creates a habitat for these species which are massively threatened. So all I'd say is just do think about the gift for someone who's got enough. Thanks everybody. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Who's on the next show, Charles?
The next show is the 22nd of November, and we're going to be deep diving into switching electricity. We've got a specialist on this. He'll be telling us what he's learnt about switching electricity, about setting up a community group, and we hope that people will think about switching and forming a community group. So look forward to seeing you then, 22nd of November, same time, same place.
I hope
Thank
you've
you.
I hope you've enjoyed the
it's
show.
a
Please
date.
share.
Yes.
Thank you, both of you.
Please share.
It's been an amazing show today. Thank you
you
very
for
much.
hosting.
Tuning. It's a
Thanks.
pleasure.
Yes, sir.
Ta-da, we're finished.
Gary, we've lost the...